The number one reason why indie games fail is a lack of marketing. You may be thinking, thanks, Captain Obvious, but hear me out because there is a misunderstanding of what marketing is. Back in 2010, I worked on an indie game that was featured by Apple in the game section of the App Store on release day. We worked on this game as a small team in between client work that was actually paying the bills. We got the game over the finish line after a long and winding road of development spanning many months. It may have actually taken a year. It was initially a game in Flash, but the App Store launched 2 years earlier, so we decided to try our luck in the iOS Gold Rush. Fairly simple games like Doodle Jump were already finding success while we were developing our game. But a more comparable game was Angry Birds, which came out in December 2009 to a lukewarm reception. After 2 months, it was 600th place on the UK App Store and similarly buried in the US App Store. We all know of Angry Birds now as this big brand with multiple games. You can find them on lunchboxes, t-shirts, there's movies, and the company behind them, Rovio, is publicly traded in Finland. But before Angry Birds, Rovio had 51 failed games generating exactly $0. They made ends meet by doing client work like many small gaming studios did and still do. And that type of setup really isn't the best. I did that type of work for 6 years, and during my time doing that, I worked on 2 original titles that both failed. The theory is you work on client projects to pay the bills, and then any money you save is invested into original games. In reality, you never say no to client work since you don't know if it'll ever dry up, and this client work comes whenever it comes. So the original titles almost always takes a back seat. Now, I'm not saying that this can't work because obviously Rovio and others have done it, but it is no walk in the park. And in Rovio's case, they actually did not have the money to make the game in 2009. In fact, the company was barreling towards bankruptcy, and it wasn't until a relative of the CEO remortgaged their house did they get the money to make the game. Now, while this does sound daunting, it was probably nothing new for Rovio. Like many indie game studios or indie businesses in general, cash flow problems do arise fairly often, and trying to find creative ways to keep the company alive is just Tuesday. They got the game out in December, and predictably, nobody cared. This is the fate of most games released by indie studios with no marketing budget, brand name, or existing fan base. To get featured by Apple on release day is like winning the lottery. While Rovio was working on Angry Birds, I was working on a game called Propaganda Lander. It started out as a Flash game that we ported to iOS, so all the assets and animations were in Flash and the code in ActionScript. Flash doesn't work at all on the iPhone, so we rewrote the logic in C++ and built a Flash runtime in C++ so that we could play Flash animations on the iPhone. Looking back, I'm not sure that was the right decision, and I don't remember why we didn't just export the animations as PNG sequences. I have a feeling it's because developers like to develop, and this seemed like an interesting technical challenge, but it is also a top reason why indie game developers don't finish their games and can't ship. The number one rule is you gotta ship, but that's a topic for another video. Back to this story, and well, it gets worse. Partway through development, we decided that our game wasn't premium enough because we didn't want to charge the popular prices at the time, which was 99 cents or $1.99. So we created a series of animated cutscenes and hired a voice actor to bring our main villain to life.
He's not coming.
I sent the credits. I will be filled with holy light.
He just wants your money. You're not going to talk to the Rickster.
You don't talk to the Rickster, bro.
Now, these could have been wrong decisions, but the artist in me is still proud of the game that we shipped and the work that we did. In the end, the game that we shipped had touch and accelerometer-based motion controls, cutscenes with excellent voice acting, and about 20 levels, including a epic 3-part boss battle. And Apple must have thought it was pretty good too, since they featured us alongside games like FIFA. Getting featured by Apple is like the holy grail, since it separates your game from the hundreds that were released that same day and the hundreds of thousands that were already on the App Store. You really couldn't have asked for more. The gods were with us. We priced the game at $4.99 with plenty of good reasons to do so. But in retrospect, once we were featured, it was probably an error. A marketing error. But before we talk about that, let's go back to Rovio. The company put their hopes in Angry Birds, and Apple did not feature the game on release day. In fact, the game didn't go anywhere for 2 months. So what did Rovio do? Well, I wasn't there, so I can only piece it together. The big market is the US App Store, but that's also where most of the competition is. Rovio decided to focus on smaller markets, with the first being their native Finland. And to get the game ranking in the top charts, only required a few hundred downloads. Once they did that, they went to focus on Sweden, Denmark, Greece, and the Czech Republic. Amassing tens of thousands of downloads in these smaller regions produced a signal that eventually reached Apple, but also anyone else who were paying attention to these charts. Apps that do well in smaller yet similar markets are likely to do well in the US. This made Angry Birds newsworthy to the app review sites and the media that surrounded the App Store. But this was not the big move. Rovio had more up their sleeves. Okay, so we just say that Rovio improved their rankings in these smaller regions, but how? One thing they could have done is work to improve their icon, titles, descriptions, screenshots, or what is known as App Store optimization. But they could have also bought ads in these smaller regions, given that the price would have been way cheaper than in the United States. One thing to note is that Rovio partnered with Chilingo to release Angry Birds. Chilingo is now owned by EA, but at the time they were an independent publisher with experience in successful iOS games and had a good relationship with Apple. Now there could have been some help there too, but Rovio made the conscious decision to partner with Chilingo to release this game. But whatever they did do, it wasn't simply just updating the game, since no new updates came out during this time. When Angry Birds did have their first update, it included 42 new levels and, more importantly, coincided with Apple featuring the game in the UK App Store. Now this was no coincidence. Rovio notified Chilingo that they felt the game was ready after it ranked in these smaller app stores and stayed there. Chilingo used their relationship with Apple to plan this feature with a newsworthy app update. This is also marketing, timing events for maximum impact. And that takes us back to Propaganda Lander and what we should have done when Apple unexpectedly featured us. We should have lowered the price to 99 cents, at least temporarily, if not permanently. Why? Because the best way to get discovered is to be in the top 100, ideally the top 10. And the list is just a popularity contest of who's getting the most downloads. Apps that get more downloads rank higher, and the higher you rank, the more likely people are to buy your game. If Propaganda Lander was actually good, and there's evidence that it was from reviews, and of course Apple featuring it, then lowering the price would have helped it break into the top 100. And once you get into the top 100, you're more likely to stay there, and that would help drive sales for an extended period of time. This one small action could have put the company on a completely different path. Angry Birds sales skyrocketed after being featured on the UK App Store, and during this time, Rovio doubled down on the momentum and released a free light version of the game. Then in April, it hit #1 on the US App Store, and the rest is history. Sales for Propaganda Lander completely stopped once we were no longer featured. A couple of months later, we released an update and nobody cared. A year later, we did a complete refresh and dropped the price to $1.99, and even less people cared. The funny thing is, it's not that we didn't know we needed to do marketing, we just didn't know what we were doing. Looking back at our old website, I can see our attempts at marketing with the blog, posting content, but it was a hodgepodge of iOS development posts, thoughts on gaming events, game reviews, stuff on game design. It's kinda cute seeing how we were pretending to do marketing like a child trying to imitate their parents. So back to the original question, what is marketing? The frustrating thing for developers is that there is no easy answer. It depends on the thing you're trying to sell, where you're selling it, to whom, who you know, the resources you have, and a whole host of other factors. Rovio had a clear strategy, and it wasn't accidental. They designed Angry Birds, or the iPhone audience, to be intentionally simple to play, playable for short periods, and have graphics that could help them create an icon that would stand out on the App Store. Then the goal was to get into the top 100 by optimizing the game listing in smaller regions. And finally, have a partner who can help get the game featured when the time was right with a big update, trailer, and free version, which meant Angry Birds would show up in the top charts for both free and paid. The premise of marketing is to get your product in front of the right potential customers as many times as you can, so that maybe this time they'll be ready to buy. And if you don't do that, even the best of luck won't save you. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like, and for more on game development, check out this video.